Recording had just begun.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our Town Council regular meeting of May 27th, 2025. I would like to officially call this meeting to order at 6 p.m. Mr. Town Clerk, could you please do a roll call?
Mayor James,
Here.
Councilman Gutenberg,
Here.
Councilman McCormick,
Here.
Councilman Sampson,
Here.
Councilman Johnson.
Here.
Madam Mayor, you have a quorum.
Thank you very much. You could all please stand and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Council, if you have had a moment to look at the agenda, I will entertain a motion to accept the agenda as presented.
Motion to accept the agenda as presented for tonight's meeting.
Thank you very much. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
Yes, Madam Mayor.
Go ahead, Councilman McCormick.
Yeah, so Ms. Minor, just a quick question for you before we move forward with the agenda. Is our town attorney on virtually by any chance? I don't physically see him in the room today.
No, he's not.
Okay, so just for the record, I did request that the town attorney be present based off of some of the information that was discovered last week. I'm disappointed to hear, despite that request, that he is not present either virtually or physically.
Okay, Mr. Town Clerk, could you please do a roll call?
Councilman Gutenberg,
Here.
It's an aye, sorry.
Aye.
If you agree
Oh,
with the
so yeah.
agenda, please say aye. If not, nay.
Aye.
Councilman McCormick,
No.
Councilman Sampson,
Aye.
Councilman Johnson,
Aye.
Mayor James,
Aye.
and the motion passes.
Thank you very much. You all should have received the minutes for the meeting on May 20th. I will entertain a motion to accept the minutes.
Madam Mayor, I make a motion to accept the minutes from special meeting on May 20th, 2025 as presented.
Second.
Any discussion?
Yes, just one question. So in the minutes, just a point of clarification for me, as we did a closed session for it wasn't even advice, it was a briefing,
Legal update.
right? Legal update. And so I just wanted to clarify what is our requirement to communicate that closed session in the meetings to make sure we're doing that right.
You are just jumping one ahead.
All right, thank you.
That will come right after this.
Okay, very good.
Yes.
All right. Thank
Any other discussion? Good question, though. Mr. Town Clerk, would you please take poll or ask for yay if they agree with accepting the minutes as presented, or nay if they do not?
Councilman Gutenberg,
Yay.
Councilman McCormick,
Aye.
Councilman Sampson,
Aye.
Councilman Johnson,
Aye.
Mayor James.
I agree as well. I'm an
All right, the
aye.
motion passes.
All right, next is the disclosure of the closed session. In accordance with the Maryland Open Meetings Act, public bodies are required to disclose the general topics discussed in the statutory authority for any closed session, and that disclosure must be presented at the next open meeting. Attached to the agenda for today's meeting, it's not attached because it hasn't been approved yet. You will find a written, was it attached?
No.
Kelly? Okay, you will find a summary of the closed session held on Tuesday, May 20th. For the record, I will now read the required disclosure into the minutes. The town council convened in a closed session on May 20th following proper vote and announcement in accordance with the Maryland Open Meetings Act. The session was held at Town Hall and began at 7:10 PM. The meeting was closed pursuant to 3-305B of the General Provisions Article of the Maryland Code, specifically citing the following exemption. Statutory authority 3-305B7 to consult with attorney to obtain legal advice. The purpose of the closed session was legal updates. Present at the meeting were Mayor James, Councilman Gutenberg, Councilman McCormick, Councilman Sampson, Councilman Johnson, Town Attorney Gullo, Acting Town Manager Minor, Director of Legislative Services, Director Phipps, and Town Clerk Lawrence Jones. The session adjourned at 9:29 PM. Therefore, I have fulfilled the requirements by the Open Meetings Act. This brings us to our next item on the agenda, which is public comment. Before, I'd like to acknowledge that, though, before the people here, I'd like to acknowledge that I received a note for the record that can you hear me? Thank you. That the town council received 2 emails addressed to council members and legislative staff regarding the stipend discussion that took place during the May 20th, 2025 meeting. These emails were submitted by Lashana Marks and Kiera Mayan. While I was not included on the original distribution of these messages, I have since reviewed them. In the interest of transparency and public record, both emails will be formally entered into the record for this meeting and made available as part of the meeting file. All right. And so I have a few people that would like to speak tonight. First on the agenda, first up to speak is Catherine Miles and Barbara Hayes. I ask that you state your name for the record, whether you live in the incorporated town limits, and please keep your comments to 3 minutes or less. Come on down.
There, Kathy Miles. I do not live in the town of La Plata, just on the outskirts.
And Barbara Hayes from the La Plata Garden Club. I do not live in La Plata either
Right. And I'm
anymore.
from the Charles County Garden Club. So we're here originally to ask. On some really nice portable, lightweight planters. And the idea would be that if you guys would pay for the planters and the plants and the soil, the garden clubs, both of our garden clubs would be pleased to plant them. And then the businesses would be in charge of watering them. And it'd be easier since they were planters and not hanging baskets. But in the meantime, since Chris is here, we have to brag on him a lot. So Barbara's going to tell you everything he's done for the La Plata Garden Club and the town of La Plata.
Good evening, everyone. Basically, Chris helped us redesign the Star Garden, which hopefully you all are familiar with, where the big star is. There's a garden to commemorate the tornado victims in the early 1900s and the one 20 some years ago, and also the people that came and helped with that. So the La Plata Garden Club maintains that, and Chris has helped us revamp it and put in a lot of the pollinator plants that kind of go along with the bird city of the town, and also just a lot healthier environment. And he also enabled us to Baywise certification, or to do a Baywise certification through the Master Gardeners, as far as, making it good for the environment, the water and that kind of thing. And I'll throw this in too, as a Master Gardener, he also had the little pocket park, Baywise too, with all the work that he's done just to make it so that it's, pollinator friendly, people friendly, and just very pretty to look at.
Then if anybody's noticed at the courthouse, there is a little inset, which is a Fletcher Garden, and Judge West asked that we do something since it was named in honor of the first Charles County Garden Club president for the people who are getting married and also have lunch around there. And once again, Chris designed, planted, bought the plants, did pretty much the whole thing soup to nuts. We were just like the little peons who worked in there. And it's a beautiful, beautiful addition to the county now. It's a beautiful addition to the town. So I can't think of any one person who has done more to beautify the town of La Plata than Chris Wagnum.
And you know what? Doesn't that deserve some type of recognition?
I would say so.
Well, I think you are right too. So Chris, that you did not make eye contact at all while this is being done. I mean, I'm just calling you out on this. Yeah, come on down. You have done more for the town than people realize. And for that, thank you very much. So that what I'd like to do is present you with a certificate of recognition to you for your tireless work to improve the natural and built environments in the town of La Plata and educate of the town's residents, businesses, and visitors on the environmental, social, and economic benefits of native plantings, which I didn't even know about. It was only through your dedication that the Bird City Pocket Park was brought to life to become a haven for birds, bees, and the people who share their space. You have planted the seeds for community sustainability that will grow and bloom for years to come. And I look at that as your job is done here. We're going to let you go to Pennsylvania. We're going to let you leave here so you can.
Leaving in a few weeks.
But in all seriousness, you have made such a difference in our town. From this is the obvious things. It's the things that go unnoticed that we thank you for. We know, if you know, you know, and we know. So thank you very much. You will be sorely missed, but I appreciate you coming out here, even though I'm sure you didn't want to. And any words that you'd like?
Thank you. Every time you walk in the door.
All right, next on the speakers list is Tarina Ollie. Is she here? I did not see her come in. All right, how about Jason Stubler? All right, how about Alyssa Best? All right. Come on down. I won't call you up here to embarrass you or anything like that. I only do that once.
Re-election. My name is Aaliyah Bess, and this is my sister Alyssa Bess, and we are the co-founders of Milo Mobility, a clean energy mobility company founded right here in Charles County. We're a self-sustaining zero emissions company, and we're deploying our fleet to be around Charles County. And here is a mock image, if you all can see, of what it will potentially look like. It will be a vending machine style. And here for the audience, so you all can see. So it will be clutter proof and theft proof. Milo aligns directly with the county's Blue Zone initiatives and many eco initiatives within the county and the state of Maryland as a whole. We deliver clean air, active lifestyles, and transit equity. We believe in keeping dollars circulating inside of our local economy. Our system is built to benefit not just the riders, but businesses, seniors, and families who need a new, safe option to get around. And we're doing it without emissions, without clutter, and without waiting years to make change happen. What we're asking for today is access to sit down with the right departments, align with La Plata's transportation and zoning plans, and move forward with a pilot that puts this town on the map as a first mover in the city for smart mobility. What we have constructed is the answer and the solution to micromobility as a whole. We have created a solution to micromobility specifically built for rural areas. As residents of Bryan's Road, we have experienced the transit problem firsthand, not being able to get to work, to school, even simple things like going to the store to get something to eat. But
Or sync to your local Vanguard stop.
yes, we have created a sync transit system that will sync our already existing transit system and to create a more sustainable, more innovative, more revolutionized Charles County.
I love the entrepreneurship. That is awesome. If I could make a suggestion, if you could reach out to the town manager with your information, then she would be able to show you where you need to go and get it to the right people. But thank you so much for bringing that to our attention. I appreciate it.
Yes, thank you. And we've
Be-
already been in contact with some members of the county. We are hopefully trying to have our pilot by the India Head Naval Base, so the local base people can be able to go to the local Oasis shop or things they do need to do in the county. And we're trying to expand it out to the La Plata area. So hopefully for our hospital workers or local federal workers like yourself can be able to have micromobility in the area, because Charles County walkability score is 25 out of 100, which is one of the lowest by far. So we're here to hopefully change that.
That is incredible. Thank you both so much.
Thank you so
Appreciate that.
much.
All right, and also signed up is Nicholas Kay. If you'd like to come down and speak. I ask that you state your name, your full name, whether you live in the incorporated town limits, and if you could limit your comments to 3 minutes, that would be wonderful. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Nick Shivda. I've lived in the town since 2009. I'm on my neighborhood's HOA and all that good stuff. I don't know if this is a proper forum for it. I actually have questions. Can I ask questions or?
You can ask questions, but we won't answer them from the dais, but it might be best to put them in writing to give to the town manager so she can disseminate them in the right way. But you can still ask them if you want.
Yeah.
What's on your mind?
Well, I've just reviewed the meeting from last week. Obviously, there's, alarming, troubling things from that meeting. And I just kind of wanted to see if that's done, or is there still action being taken against that, or if there's, I'm not big in town politics or anything like that, but I don't know much about it, how it works. But from what I saw from the meeting last week, there's some, at least for me, those were troubling things, alarming items that came up. And I've done, risk compliance and auditing for, 20 years for the government. And normally in situations like what's going on here, there's a third party auditor, an independent assessor, if you will. And I wanted to know if there's been any talk or consideration of bringing it to the state's attorney's office, just to kind of have an investigation into what actually happened, or I don't know. I don't know, but I just feel like there's more to be done as a follow-up to last week. And I was also wondering what the criteria is, according to the charter or whatever it may be, to have a recall vote. There's just things I'm very uncomfortable with from last week. And I feel that had this information come out sooner than last week, prior to the elections, moreover, that there would have been a different outcome. So I'm just concerned with that. And also obviously with the recent discussions with the town attorney, I feel like there might be a little bit of issues there too. So I just want to know if there's still, an ongoing discussion, if there's still proceedings that need to take place, or if it's all done and put to bed and we're moving forward and all that good stuff. Obviously it's a tough situation. I don't know if it was planned to be discussed tonight. But I just, just curious as a resident, I don't know much about the charter or what it says or town politics, but, just concerned. That's all.
Thank you very much.
All right.
And that concludes our public comment. We go on to our items of recognition.
Point of order, Madam
tonight.
Mayor. So last Tuesday.
Sorry, Councilman McCormick, I did not recognize you as we are closed. Public comment is closed. This is
Okay, so resolution 2301, section 6 says I can appeal that decision. So I would like to appeal the decision to be able to make a point of order on the public comment.
all right. Seeing no second there, we're going on to items of recognition. The proclamation Small Cities Month. Councilman Johnson, would you please read that?
Yes, Madam Mayor, thank you. Town of La Plata proclamation for Small Cities Month, June 2025. Whereas small cities and towns under 50,000 populations are the home to millions of Americans and constitutes the vast majority of municipalities across the United States. And whereas small cities and towns strive to strengthen their communities through the provisions of service and programs to improve the quality of life for all citizens. And whereas the federal government is an essential partner in the success of small cities and towns and must be encouraged to continue to support programs and legislation that strengthen small communities. And whereas state governments are partners in the success of small cities and towns and must be encouraged to continue to support programs and legislations that strengthen communities. And whereas organizations, businesses, and citizens are partners in the success of small cities and towns and must be encouraged to continue to grow their efforts to make small communities a valuable choice for people to live in. And whereas during these challenging economic times, the need for a renewed intergovernmental partnership to support essential public services is more important than ever to ensure the safety and growth of small town America. And whereas the National League of Cities President and Small Cities Council of National League of Cities have declared June 2025 as Small Cities Month. Now, therefore, we, the Council of the Town of La Plata, do hereby proclaim June 2025 as Small Cities Month and encourage President Trump, Congress, state governments, organizations, businesses, and all citizens to recognize this event and to work together this month and throughout the year to invest in small cities and towns to better serve the lives of all citizens. Signed by Janine James Mayor, Paul Gutenberg Councilman, Patrick McCormick Councilman, Gregory Sampson Councilman, and Tajon Johnson Councilman.
Thank you so much. Now we get to recognize some of our great neighborhoods within the town that they've applied for a grant. The town of La Plata is proud to support these neighborhood engagements through our community grant program. We do this several times a year. Today's recipients will be hosting something within their community by June 30th, and each of the council members will either call them up if they're here or recognize if they're not there, what they are doing. And I encourage everyone, you do not need to live in a neighborhood. You just need a gathering together to take advantage of this and a time to gather together and build that community within your community. So first up, I'm going to go with Councilman Gutenberg.
All right, thank you. So Dr. Lois McDonald, she could not be here tonight, but she is organizing a book event for the children of Quailwood with authors reading and a book giveaway involved.
That sounds really fun. That sounds really neat. Councilman McCormick.
Yes, I'm proud to say that Taisha Owens of Kings Grant applied for this and won the grant and will be leading a food drive at one of our local shelters here. And it is also going to supplement the activity, which I think is probably one of the most favorite and fun parts in this community, which is a little neighborhood social. So it's great to see that happening in Kings Grant. And thank you to Miss Owens for putting in for this.
And if you could come on down and we would present you with your certificate. Can you tell us a little bit more about what you're planning?
Yes. See what the need is first, what the food needs are, and hopefully find those. We know there's hungry families in the community every day, breakfast, lunch, dinner. So anything that we can do to support the hunger effort is what the goal is.
Thank you so much. See you.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Councilman Sampson.
Yes, Maisha Williams will be bringing the Quailwood community together for a social style block party with the goal of hopefully rebuilding and energizing that community into developing a possible HOA and other community events. And I would like to thank her for that. Maisha, please come up.
And what do you have in mind on how to execute that?
Our mission is to have a social event because, again, we don't have to push away, so we want to get the community together. And also focus on kids' fun. So some maybe water activities, ice cream to incorporate into the day of fun.
That sounds great.
Thank you.
Best of luck. And Councilman Johnson.
Yes, thank you. I have a presentation from Ms. Shelby Payne, accepting an award on behalf of the Clarks Run Citizens Association for their initiative and kicking off summer with a carnival party.
Good to see you. Tell us more about this. This sounds so fun.
September 23, we got the association from Clarks Run back up and going. We are having second annual summer party. Everyone loved it so much last year that we decided to do it again. So we were able to get notify our members that we got our trail back up and going. Built the bridges for the trail, which is public, so come see us. And that's at Silver Lake Park. Okay. And it's good for
Thank you. Congratulations to all the recipients, and I hope this energizes other communities to also apply and just spread the joy within your community. Next on the agenda is our treasurer's report. Come on down, Ms. Larson.
Good evening, Council. Do you have any questions regarding this month's treasurer's report?
Yes. Yeah,
Go ahead,
Okay.
Councilman
Thank-
Hoover.
Thank you. So a couple of questions. Can I start with on the balances, the cash balances? So question there. Can you describe what we do to either benchmark or best practice the quantities that we're doing, like for instance, for the checking, right? So the amount of money that we keep, I think it's 1.7 million right now.
Yeah.
How do you determine what the correct value is as a best practice or a standard?
So actually, that is set by the bank based on the services we have. So we don't pay any fees to the bank by keeping that balance in, and anything over that, it transfers into our ICS account, which is an investment account.
Okay, so let me give it in another form then. So similar, same question, right? But like related to, let's just scope it to the water enterprise fund. So in operation of that service, is there a practice that we use that we benchmark against to determine how much cash we should have on hand to operate that fund, as an example? And then I would use that to sort of like say that's the process against all of them.
So really, you're talking about fund balance and reserves. So that is not necessarily in the cash part. That is on our general. And we have a fund balance. And this is something that I've discussed with the finance committee that we need to do, because right now we have a rainy day fund balance in the general fund. However, we don't have that set up for these enterprise funds. They have an unassigned fund balance other than the sewer fund, which has the major facility fee fund balance, because those amounts are specific for a purpose. So we keep them separate.
Okay.
So right now, we have 1.6 million in the general fund, which I believe is low. We need to reevaluate that, especially because when we established that for more than 10 years ago, our budget was half of what it is now.
Okay.
So it is something that we are discussing, and it's more of putting in reserves to make sure that those funds are reserved for a specific reason if something comes up.
So did the finance committee, when they were meeting, did they offer uh, sort of an outline of a plan or how we would, a roadmap or I mean, any kind of how we're going to get to that?
No, but the typical, based on the GFOA best practices, at least 2 months worth is what we should have in our rainy day fund.
Yeah, no, I didn't mean, yeah, so that would be, yeah, that is an approach. What I guess what I was getting at is because we don't really have that today, did the finance committee make any recommendations that are actionable is what I was
No,
getting at?
this is something I've had on my radar that we need to evaluate.
Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, so it's definitely, I'm feeling it. That's now on my
Mhm.
radar as well. And it's something that, maybe I'll ask, Ms. Minor, is there, should we, how do you want to go about, like, when we identify things like this, where we would like to, or one of us, I should say, right, would like to have an action, where we go down this path? Maybe it's a future working session where we discuss those. Is that the appropriate way?
Attention, and we'll get it on a future work session.
Thank you. I'll do that.
Thank you.
Yep.
Also, to add to that,
Yes.
there's other reserves that we need to consider. Right now, we have a building reserve, we have a vehicle reserve.
Yeah.
We need to establish what amounts are going to go in there. There was where it was set up in previous budgets where it was an expense, but it's really not an expense. It's a reallocation of funds to a specific purpose.
Yeah.
And we need to change how we changed how we've been budgeting, but we need to change how we're allocating that to these different reserves.
Yeah, and and in full agreement with that. As I was walking through those and looking at them, that's what came to mind, right? Is how are we determining what those valid levels are? Because it's a lot of cash when we look at it. I mean, not all cash, obviously, but there's a lot of accounts with liquid assets essentially there. And really, we need, I think, I need more information about what the right levels of those is to understand, because like I know we get investment income from them, but the concern is if we're holding that much cash and the investment income is not the dollar amount is obvious here, but as a taxpayer, we want to know, are we outpacing inflation holding that much cash, right? And so we may need to get into a discussion about doing more rapid capital outlays in order to take better advantage of the position that we're in, right, for today. And that's really what I was getting at with that.
Yeah, so really, we only keep the 1.75 in cash. The rest is invested. The majority of invested is in the ICS account, which is 0.5 basis point above the MELGIP. We have the MELGIP investments, and then we also have the investments in multi-bank securities. Those are the ones that I go in and actually select the investments. And I've changed my strategy probably about 7-8 months ago, where I'm trying to get the higher investments over a longer period because I can go out 2 years. So I'm trying to capture those higher rates of return compared to laddering it. I was laddering it.
Yeah. So that is a good description. So is the strategy that you're referring to, is that written out in a way where it can be evaluated by the council?
There's an investment policy, which is very restrictive. So I can't invest in a lot. I'm very limited in what I can invest in.
Okay.
The other thing I wanted to point out, as far as allocating the investment incomes, that I actually I base that allocation on the fund balance that's based on the balance sheet from our financial statements. And you can see what's in the fund balance that's unrestricted and restricted on our financial statements.
Okay. And then next question then is on, and this is probably just an education thing for me, but when I look at your report, there's lags in revenues in some of the enterprise funds that surprised me because of the way enterprise fund billing works. You know, we all know we all pay that bill quarterly and it covers all of those enterprise funds, but they're different in their lagging for revenues. Why does that happen?
Well, it shouldn't be, because so the revenue is recognized at the end of the quarter. So the bill for January 1st through March 31st would have been recognized at March 31st. So we have not recognized any revenue for our regular billings for April yet. So
that part I understand, but what I'm seeing is like a difference, a vast difference in the revenue.
Which one? Let's
let's look at one. So if we look at revenue for stormwater versus maybe sanitation, so I would expect them to, because they're all billed the same way from a residential standpoint, that if one is sitting at 50% revenue year to date, but another is where I would more likely expect it to be between 70 and 80% at this point in the reporting period. Why is one of them sitting at 40% revenue realized and another one at 50 and another one at 70? Like, how does that get out of sync?
It could be the type of fees. So like sanitation, we charge for the trash fees, but we also charge for extra carts. And we're stormwater, we have two fees, the fee that the town charges and then the fee that the Maryland State Bay Restoration charges.
Okay. All right.
So it could be the type of fees. You definitely see it in water and sewer that it's going to be different, especially with the major facility fees in the sewer end.
Okay. So then,
And other permit fees on water and sewer, there's that. And there's some of that in stormwater as well, which is, there's none of that in sanitation.
so when you close out the books on revenue for FY25, which is what this is on, you expect most of those to be about, in a reasonable proximity of what we expected?
For the most part, there were some things like permits. It's hard to predict that. I'm estimating based on the same estimate that the town's growing.
Okay. All right, that makes sense. Then let me switch over to expenditures, right? So it's sort of a similar question, but it's in particular in stormwater management, water and sewer, we have capital outlay like way out of whack, right? And I think in water and sewer, like as an example, it's the mod 2 delay, right? And in water, it's the connection out at Tillman Lake. I get that.
So your capital is not going to be like your routine operating. Your salaries and benefits should be spot on.
Yep.
Now, unless we have vacancies, then that could change there.
Okay.
Or there was a reallocation in how an employee is being utilized, but that doesn't happen much. It's more of a vacancy.
Right.
As far as contracted services, on the general fund side, admin side should be pretty predictable, but on the police side and public works, it can vary depending on what services they need and what they're trying to accomplish. But capital, it's going to be based on where we're at on the project and how far we're going along with that project.
Well, let me take the two easier ones first, staying with capital outlay, because I think with this is more just how does the expected expenditure go from the FY25 to the FY26 budget. So take the mod 2, right? Mod 2 is the large infrastructure project for the sewer plant, right? So in the case of that, I think it started later than we anticipated this year.
I'm not sure if mod 2 has started.
Okay.
I think the base of the clarifier has, which is part of mod 2.
So yeah, so we don't need to get into the details of like why it's delayed. Like you annotated both of those clearly that they were delayed, I think, and that's the cause of it. But so when that unspent money in a capital outlay in 2025, how does that travel into the 2026 budget?
So the department has to recognize that this project is not starting in this fiscal year and put it in the next fiscal year. Now, that particular, let's say with sewer, it's being funded by the major facility fees. So that's in a reserve account, like a savings account.
Okay.
So if we're not using it this year, then we have it saved for next year. And that department should be following what their progression is on these projects and budget it for that. And that would be in our capital budget. And it is in our capital budget for FY26.
So it's in our FY26 capital budget. Mod 2 is there. So we're not going to see the unrecognized expenditure in the capital outlay for mod 2 in 2025, and it's not going to be an additional set of money that's there that's going to show up to be dealt with.
And also there's one other thing you need to consider with this. So the general fund is accrual basic, modified accrual base accounting. The enterprise funds are accrual based accounting. So even though we budgeted for this, say this mod, and we have the funds there that we're using save account, the expense isn't going to show up in there at the end of the year. It's going to be depreciated over the life of that asset.
That makes sense. All right, and then so let's go into stormwater. So in stormwater, that one has quite a significant delta in the amount of project money, capital outlays. And so what is that linked to MS4 projects, or is
Correct.
that this backlog that we? talked
No,
about last
that's, most of that's MS4. And McCormick asked some questions earlier about that, and I put in the exact amounts. So MS4, the budget amount was 1.36 million, and we've expensed 107,000. Of the projects that need to be caught up and everything that we use, the contractor services and supplies, there's 143,000 that's still in the budget to be used for those. And then I also noted that 111,000 has not been captured for depreciation expense, because we typically do that at the end of the year after we put all the assets into the asset module.
Okay, so is it the case with the MS4 projects that the capital outlays haven't occurred? That's going to work the same way you just described the mod.
Correct.
Okay.
So those are, again, in the FY26 budget because they didn't do it.
Okay.
And we're just moving that savings account because most of it's being funded by the project reserve.
Okay. And so with the amount of money then that will be not expended in stormwater, what I'm getting at is trying to get us to a point where we better understand how much money will be unspent in stormwater that we will have access to work on this backlog of stormwater projects.
So there's maintenance and then there's capital. And those are two separate things. So capital, we tend to be able to use our fund balance. The maintenance should be coming from the fees, should be supporting the maintenance costs to maintain the infrastructure. But replacement of infrastructure should be coming from the fund balance, which we're supposed to offset that with the depreciation that we're capturing in the budget.
So the projects that we're talking about that are in this backlog though are part of the maintenance fees. They should be paid for by fees, I believe, right? And so with this backlog, there may be enough there. We don't know the answer to this question. And I think, and it's not really fair to ask you, but I'll say for the town manager's benefit, that I think where we're at with needing to understand how to deal with the stormwater management issue backlog is we know how many tickets we have, right? But what we don't know is an estimate of what it would take if we used contract services to deal with it. I think at my level of understanding of public works right now, the way we're staffed, I think it is probably unrealistic for us to assume they're going to be able to carve out people to go realistically work that off. So what I was hoping to do is get us going on pulling the thread on how we can engage available funding that we have wherever it is, but starting with what's available in the stormwater management fund that's unspent, and scope out how much that list is going to cost us, right? And so, and I'll leave it to you to determine how to best, get to that number, obviously, but that's what I'd really like to get at, so we can make some actionable decisions that actually solve this problem.
So in the budget process for FY26, Stormwater did list out the projects and what they anticipate the costs to be, and that's part of what the amounts are in the improvements, site improvements, and also construction supplies for things that they didn't plan for.
But I think, now I'm doing this off of memory, but when I looked at the FY26 budget for stormwater, there was a slight decrease in capital outlay. And so that may be largely driven by MS4, but
the capital outlay, there's the difference between maintenance and
okay, I'm
capital
jumping
outlay. So there's
categories.
capital
Yeah.
and then there's the operating.
okay. All right. So in the operating budget side, sticking there, that's where I'm really trying to find a solution there, because we need to know the cost of them. If you already have that, or if there's some estimate of that, I would love to see it.
I can send you the listing that Public Works provided
Okay.
for the site improvements, and they listed what they needed and what it was going to cost.
I think that would be helpful for all of us as we are
right.
navigating this issue. And then once we see that number and we can get some consensus built around that, I think we can then probably make an informed decision on how to go forward with that. So,
Yeah,
all
I
right.
believe it was like 112,000, and they have all the different projects listed out, and I will.
All right. Okay. Well, if that's the number for 150 to 200, I mean, those are all relatively small projects then.
Yes.
So that's
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
good news, right? So,
Yep.
okay. So saying that for residents benefits. All right. So, and then the last question I'll ask is just on inspections. So inspections is an area where obviously with the growth we have, there is a ton of additional work being done there. And
Mhm.
it looks like the costs are way out of line with what we thought they
Yeah.
were going to be. So my question is, we're just doing that with overtime, or what's driving
No.
the additional costs? How's
So
that work?
the inspections are based on what permits that, or not, but inspections that need to be done through building inspections, plumbing, electric. Actually, let me take that back. Plumbing and electric are not processed through the town, but the building inspections are. So basically, they pay a fee and then we contact Plan Check to go and do that. So it's a wash cost. So there is in my listing an budget amendment that will need to be made that
Right.
involves a revenue and an expense.
Okay, so that is mostly being driven by costs that we would, where I was really headed with it is the resource, right? So I was wondering about our town inspector and if that extra workload and cost was being absorbed by the town staff. But what I think you're pointing out to me is that we have contractors that perform many of these services for us, and so it's a pass through almost.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. Yes.
All right. Very good. I think that's all I have. All right. Thank you.
All right, that was very thorough.
All right.
Councilman McCormick, and if I may say, and I probably should have said this before you, if we could probably keep it to less than 10 minutes so that we can go, because I think all of us have some wonderful questions to ask. And if they've already been asked, if you could just say ditto or move on, so we're not asking the same question. Councilman McCormick.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. And first, thank you very much for putting this together, Ms. Larson. I know the starting point when you first joined here, these documents didn't look this great. So your hard work does not go unnoticed. So thank you very much for that. All right, I'm going to start at the top with kind of like administration-based questions, and then it may make sense to have Public Works or the Director of Legislation come up because I have a couple questions for them, if that's okay. So we'll start admin-wise, making sure I have this correct.
Councilman McCormick, point of order, it should go through before.
Ms. Minor, yes.
Before calling up any other, it should all go through the town manager.
Yep. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Okay, so projected budget FY25, 14.2 million plus or minus. Actual revenue, as Councilman Gutenberg brought up, 12.5 million. Actual expense, 11.03. For the edification of the town, that shows us that we're 22.5% away from our actual matching of the expense to the projected expense. But we should be right now, because this is April, roughly 16.5% away from that, right?
Yes, but one thing I want to point out,
Yep.
this includes capital and operating.
Okay.
And most of the capital is funded through a fund balance or a reappropriation fund balance. If you actually look at our operating, we are exactly 16.7%.
Okay, where would I find that in this document?
You didn't, I just looked that up.
Okay, so just, and again, Ms. Minor, if you don't mind, just if we could get that information beforehand, because I think that'd make it clear, because that would have
Yeah.
answered
Yeah,
probably a lot of
exactly.
questions.
However, with that said, there's a couple things that I probably should point out. There's budget amendments, which would affect that. And some
Sure.
of them are like the inspections. We've got a revenue and an expense. We also have the speed cameras. None of that revenue or expense was in there. So we have a budget amendment that needs to be done for a revenue and an expense.
Yep, and again, I think that could be captured more easily, right? If we knew the overall, hey, percent to goal, and then this is why there's been a change to that. All right, dealing with income tax, I see the percent to overall revenue gained from income tax versus real property tax. What I don't see in here is the percent to the actual budget that we have at this time. So where are we at from a goal perspective? We'll start with income tax first.
So income tax, we get most of it actually in May and June. So this is kind of skewed on, it says 51%. It's kind of skewed where we will see most of that in May and June. Trying to think what amount was the budget for the income tax. I don't have that exactly. I give you guys an overview, not
Yep.
the actual. So if you want very specific details, I can provide that separately, but in this report, it's an overview.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, the reason I asked that question again is I want to make sure, similar to Councilman Gutenberg, and I'm sure the rest of the council, are we on track? And most importantly, I think for me, being a new town councilman up here is, are we budgeting correctly?
Yeah.
Right, so that's why I asked that question.
So the property tax, we are pretty much max. We're not going to get any more. We've already got as much as we're going to for this year. And we were, I believe, we've exceeded 3%. So
Okay.
it's pretty close. Income tax, I know that May and June will get a large amount, probably between 800 and 1 million
Okay.
in May and June.
Where would that
However,
put us percent to goal?
We are probably going to be under, and the
Meaning
reason
we collected less revenue than we
than what budgeted.
projected.
So, and the reason of that is because when I did the budget, I included income tax from trusts and escrow accounts, which are very volatile. And so in the FY26 budget, because I learned that they vary, I mean, by hundreds of thousands, I did not include that in the FY26 budget. I only included the income tax that was dispendable.
Okay, thank you for that, and I appreciate the overview. Some of these questions are going to be specifically to legislative services, so you may or may not be able to answer them. And then Ms. Minor, I would request if Ms. Larson doesn't know the specifics, if Ms. Phipps, if she's here, she could help answer those. So I just want to make sure I have this correct again from an overall standpoint. Year to date right now, 280K plus or minus has been spent, in a legislative department, 8.8K in elections. So they're not the same. They're two different things. So let's call it 288K between the two. And then the projected budget for those two was what, 473K for legislative and almost $30,000 for elections. And when I look at your document here, I see a projected miss of 41% spend in legislative services, which is the highest for any department, to exclude planning and zoning. And then I see on elections, again, small amount. So obviously every dollar is exacerbated more, but this is the biggest single miss in the entire document. A miss of 70.1%. So I guess my first question would be, what do we budget for in 2025 in the legislative services?
So part of that is because we had a vacancy in the town clerk, and that was a significant amount. The other contracted services, I would not be able to answer. And I believe Director Phipps answered the legislation was based on quotes that she got from electronic ballots that ended up being a lot less than what the quotes were.
So that was for the election process, and I appreciate that answer. But again, from a legislative service perspective, and I may be wrong, you're telling me that the miss for the legislative budget of $192,000 was for the town clerk?
Well, I mean, in salaries, you can see that we have a remaining budget of roughly 134,000.
Meaning we underspent in salaries by 134K.
Well, that's what it is now. We've still got another 2 months. But we
Understood.
didn't have a town clerk for a period like, what, 6-7 months?
Yeah, again, so this is the concern, because what this is telling me based off the answer, and this is why I think department heads may be better able to answer this, is we are saying the reason we missed on legislative services by 41% in the plan right now, when we should be at 16.7%, because we got 2 months left, is we didn't have a town clerk.
No, I'm saying that's part of the reason.
I know. So what are the other parts is my question.
I don't know that.
I know. So Ms. Minor, if you don't mind, could Ms. Phipps come up to answer some of these?
Ms. Phipps, can you come answer that question if possible?
And thank you, Ms. Larson. Okay, well, we'll move. Thank you, Ms. Minor. I appreciate that. No, all good. Thank you. All right, so moving on to salary and benefits, since you brought this up. We had a concerned resident come in. We had 2 emails that were sent in here. What was the projected salary spend in the FY25 budget? Where are we at right now?
I think I have specifically.
So if I'm not mistaken, again, I see it like in water fund. I see it in stormwater and sewer.
Well, I see what year to date is. I just don't know what the budget,
So what was the year-to-date spend on salary?
6.1.
Okay, and I find that on page 7, correct?
Yes.
But we don't have what the projection was. So we have no idea if we're on target, over target, under target right now.
But I
Okay.
can get you that specific information.
Okay, I would appreciate that. The second question I have, I know you answered, but just for the record, what was the pay that, and again, we're elected officials, so what was the pay given to the former town council? So what was like an average town councilman from last FY25? How much money did they make year to date? And then the mayor, how much money has been made year to date?
I didn't answer that question. I don't have it on my listing.
Okay,
That-
let me know if this is correct or not, because I did get an answer, and I don't know whose colors are whose and who's answering.
Mine are blue.
Okay, so I have in the answers here, year to date right now, the regular pay for the mayor, and again, this is why I was hoping the town attorney would be here to answer the difference between regular pay and stipend, because I consider myself an educated guy. I don't know the difference between the two. But you have year to date regular pay for the mayor right now, roughly 8K. And year-to-date stipend right now, 50.8K. Do I have that roughly correct? 58K plus or minus?
Year to date for all council?
No, for just the
Just
mayor
me.
right now.
That, again, I didn't answer that question, so I don't.
Ms. Minor, who is the one that answered in red? Again, I apologize for not knowing the colors.
No, well, I didn't put them on there for you.
Okay.
It was our Director of Human Resources, Ms. Kennedy.
Okay. Do you mind if I ask Ms. Kennedy if that's correct or not? Because I still haven't got an answer on the record if it's right or wrong.
We did confirm those numbers and they are correct.
Okay, so just to be clear again, 58.8K roughly to the mayor year to date, just January to April 30th when this document came out. Yes. Okay, yes, and I got that. So I appreciate that. And again, the actual fiscal year to date, roughly 65.8K. Does that sound about right?
Yes.
Okay, thank you for
That's
that.
the figure you gave.
Yeah, so again, Ms. Minor, if you don't mind, if you could just direct a question to our town attorney about this issue again. The resolution dealing with salary is relatively straightforward to me. I just want clarity on the difference in stipend and regular because 58K is obviously higher than 21K. And I just want to make sure that we are in alignment here moving forward. Okay, back to streets and stormways real quick. I know Councilman Gutenberg asked a couple of these questions. I do see Public Works and Stormwater in the back there, so they may be able to help out as well. But roughly 1.5 million budgeted there, 1.1 million actioned. I appreciate you giving the explanation there. Can you just help me out? Because I'm still confused reading it. That you talk about like missed projects, contracting, where all this is going. Can you help just clarify that for me and for the townspeople?
Well, as far as projects, I'm not sure about, but
Mhm.
you talked about the difference between the budget and what we spent so far. And part of
Correct.
that is for the roads, the overlay, we get HUR dollars. And those amounts are for it's reserved to pave the streets in the town.
Yes.
So in FY '24, in June, the end of FY '24, before FY '25, the director of operations asked if they could go use reserves, which was a budget amendment for FY '24, to continue paving so that they would not have to stop and pick up in FY '25.
Okay.
I said that was fine. We have 204,000. However, because you're using this, which is so that you don't stop using the contractor and then pick up when you hit FY '25 to replenish that reserve that you guys used for paving. And so that's why we're under the budget of 149,000. They went a little over. That is going to replenish that reserve that they used at the end of FY '24.
Okay, thank you. And then final question for you, admin style, and then I'll make a comment. So the final question is, has this town ever been audited? And when's the last time we were audited on the budget?
We're audited, well, we're not audited on budget, but we're audited annually. We are required, Maryland state law, I have to report our audit to the state and the federal government.
So-
We're audited annually.
So we're audited annually. We're missing in some departments by upwards of 70% from budgeted to actual. What do these audits say? They say La Plata is doing well, doing poorly,
Well,
on track.
you can view our audit, actually 10 years worth of our audits online. It's under, go under departments, finance, and then there's our financial audits.
Okay.
So it depends on the audit. There's also some forecasting there based on operations, but some of these, there's a plan. A budget is a plan. Sometimes the plan doesn't happen. Personnel leave.
Yep.
We have that vacancy, it doesn't get filled, or projects that were originally planned don't get done. But as far as our reporting on our financials, that we have never had a finding, at least for the last 10 years, have never had a finding on our financials, which
So-
you can view our financials. So in our financials, there's actually 3 financial statements. There's the townwide financial statement, which is based on accrual accounting. There's the government activity financials, which is based on a modified accrual accounting. And then there's the enterprise funds, which is based on the accrual accounting. And then there's a whole bunch about the debt and stuff like that. So that type of information, you probably want to go to a financial, and there's an MD&A, which is that kind of talks about discrepancies or the variance, not discrepancy, the variance between the budget and the actuals and what happened in that situation.
No, I appreciate that. And again, just to be clear, when you say we can find it, town website, I'm assuming, and just in the search bar, type
Yeah,
in previous
Yeah,
audits,
there's
right?
like 10 years forth their both budgets and the audited financial statements.
Thank you very much, Ms. Larson. I appreciate that. Again, I'll just say, as a resident and a councilman, it is concerning to me when I do see these radical misses, right? I firmly believe, just like you put in the opening, we should be roughly 16.7% away from our projected goals. I'm seeing a lot as high of 70% in the legislative department. I'm seeing some that have overspent. And I think that what we're doing here is we're kind of mixing and matching by which department missed their projection by overspending, by thank goodness this department underspent. And I think from an accounting standpoint, one, that probably makes your head spin, right, as the town attorney. But two, right, again, it talks about good governance. So I hope that moving forward, we're holding our department heads just a little bit more accountable to the plan moving forward, because, right, we have some things going on here when it comes to what is and is not being spent on whom. And I think this leads to a lot of those questions.
So as I mentioned probably many times, we've changed the way we budgeted. I actually require departments to list out line items that was over 5,000, their contracted services. So our FY26 budget should be more apt to be in line unless they say they no longer need a contracted service and they decide not to continue that. Or if they say this something has happened and we really need to get some type of contractor, or we need suddenly supplies more, there should be somewhere where we can actually say, okay, well, this is what you budgeted, this is what's actually happening. Now we can kind of really know what's happened. Before, I had no idea what contract services they used. I can say, well, we didn't use as much as we budgeted.
And again, this feedback is not meant for you as the director of finance. This is meant to the department heads, right? Again, departments are missing by upwards of 70%. Color me skeptical on if they can figure out the 26 budget just because you're asking for line items. So I appreciate the time. Thank you very much, Ms. Larson. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Just three things. The first one, and I know we have, the different accounts, capital fund, enterprise funds, all that. But when I went through and read through everything, I tried to dumb it down and keep it simple. So I want to know, just yes or no, based on what you're seeing right now, will we hit a deficit, meaning not pulling from any reserves, not borrowing any money? Will we hit a deficit at the end of the year based on current projections?
I do not believe so. And part of that is because we have a higher than projected interest earnings. And also some of the amendments are revenue and expense that wash.
So when you say interest earnings, those interest from where?
From our investments. We
So I'm
invest,
saying not counting investments. I'm not, just our straight budget,
well, yeah, but
not including that.
well, that's part of our budget. That's in our budget.
So
So
you're
it's a
saying-
revenue and we have our expenses. So what you want to know is, will our expenses exceed our revenues? And I'm saying, I do not anticipate it to do that.
Okay, so what you're telling me is that interest gained, and I'm assuming that's interest for future costs? Or are you
Investment-
saying that interest that's
investment
due
earnings.
this year?
Investment earnings. So our
Wait a minute,
cash,
wait a minute. You're over talking me, you're
Oh.
changing things. What I want to know is, okay, when was those interest payments?
there's
guaranteed?
not payment, there's not interest out, it's investment earnings coming in.
I'm not
The only
asking-
debt we have,
I'm not asking that question. We're not communicating. What I'm asking is if you're telling me that we have interest that is coming in, right? That source of funding had to be obligated, paid for, invested in at some past date for that revenue to come in. So I'm asking you, when was that you're banking on now? So I have a clearer understanding of what you're saying.
I guess I'm not understanding what you're asking
So
because
let me-
we have investments that come in every month. We get from the ICS accounts. We also get from the multi-bank security accounts. We also get from Miljet. So that is investment earnings that the town receives from cash in those investments.
So
And
let me
those,
Ask the question this way, and I'm just gonna give you an example.
Okay.
and You can tell me if I'm making too much to do over this, because I'm trying to get a specific answer. So basically, if I wanted to have a laddered portfolio for me, I would go out and get 12 CDs or 12 investments, and each month, those investments would come due in the future year. So every month, I know I got this much coming in, that much coming in, this much coming in, that much coming in.
Mhm.
That's what I'm hearing you say.
yes, we,
Okay, and
every
you're
month,
saying that is calculated into our budget.
it is in our budget. It's a budget line item. Yes.
Okay.
It's a revenue budget line.
And so then I asked, when was those investments made?
So the investments, there's the ICS accounts, which is our balance, that's through the bank. Those investments are in there until it's like a sweep account. So when we need it for cash, it's swept, but it's kept in investments. Now we have the multi-bank securities. Those are the ones that I manage every month. I select the investments, and like I've said before, I've changed the strategy from a ladder strategy to purchasing the ones that are 2 years out to try to get the higher interest as the interest rates have gone down.
Okay, that it still didn't answer my question, but I'll move on. So the contract services, and this may or may not be something that you can answer, and it may not even be appropriate for this forum. If not, just let me know and I'll move on. Okay, the contract services. Are those contract services tied to pay for performance? In other words, once that service is provided, somewhere at the end of the year, is there an audit that says financially we got the bang for the buck that we needed? These services were performed.
That would be a question for the departments. And this is something that I have been trying to incorporate more analytics in the choices that we make and the contracts or the procurement that we make. So I cannot answer for the departments.
Yeah, that's understandable. I got that. Okay. So I had one last thing, and I think you might have already answered it because I asked it in the first question. So in FY26, so this will now include what you were telling me, the 2 different forms of investments. Okay, because I wasn't including that in the FY6 budget. So in the FY6 budget, what I was concerned about, based on what I saw with the FY25, is that based on those 2 budgets, and I also went back a couple of years, it looks like every year we have to raise the cost or some cost, some particular fee or cost. My biggest concern is where, I'm just using layman's terms, nickeling, diming the residents. In other words, every year we have to come back for more. Every year we have to come back for more. Every year we have to come back for more because we never put in what we actually need to do to stabilize things so the residents know 2, 3, 4, 5 years, we at least have some stability. So the question is, with the FY26 budget as currently proposed, do you believe, your professional opinion, that will stabilize us for the next year or 2, meaning 2 years, I should say, just 2 years? Or will we have to come back again and raise more fees or taxes, either directly, indirectly, or through transfers to cover next year's costs? In other words, are we just doing something that come next year, we're gonna have to do it again, and basically we're gonna have more fees, whether they're an indirect fee, a transfer fee, or something like that?
So let me just make sure I'm understanding. Are you talking about the fees associated with the enterprise funds?
I'm talking about across the board.
Okay.
In other words, what I saw was that, and I'll just use the one because it's the one that pops up the most. Say the trash can fee. We're using that as that so we don't shock the person when it comes to the usage for something else. Okay. And I remember that I asked before, or if it wasn't me, somebody asked, why don't we just raise that fee? But the question then becomes, the next logical question is, well, if we raise it and we're just raising it to cover this year's costs, are we then going to come back the following year, in other words, in FY27, and have to raise it again? Because we're not doing what we actually need to do now. And so what I'm concerned about, my biggest concern with this budget, the FY26 budget, is that we're not actually, I went through and looked at it. I don't see we're actually addressing the real systemic problems. And so what I see is we're going to either pass that budget or make some slight changes, and then we're going to come back and we're going to have to raise fees, some fee or some tax or some indirect transfer again. And I want to know, is my perception correct or is it wrong? Am I way off base? And I'm not saying that's your fault. I'm saying that's the council's fault because the council should address that. But I'm just saying, is that what I'm seeing, that basically what's been happening?
So there's a couple things. Well, you guys know about the rate study. And one of those things, we decided to do all the fees because we want to find a stable fee that we don't have to keep going like 8% and then just 2%. And then last year we did trash at 20%. And that's why I did to break even, we would have to do an 8% increase. So it was like, well, how can we help mitigate this cost and not put it on all residents when they don't use the same level of service? But kind of lost train of thought. What I'm trying to do is instead of is to have a fee that is constant, that we aren't going up and down, up and down. And that was part of the rate study, but we still need pieces of information. The other thing you have to consider is there's inflation. So our costs are going up. We have COLAs that we give employees, so the costs go up. So the cost is already going up to us. And some of that needs to be passed on, but we don't want to start doing those large increases of 8, 15, 20%. We want to try to keep it steady. And that is the objective of that study, is to make it one flat fee over a 5-6 year period. So we're not going up and down to the resident, and they can anticipate this is going to go up 3, 4, 5, whatever it is, year over year for the next 5 years.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate it.
Councilman Johnson.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. Good evening, Ms. Larson. I have a few questions for you. The first one, with the investment count, one of them missed out 35 million. Is that considered like a rainy day fund if we needed
okay.
it?
So
Can you explain that for me, please?
These are actually cash balances. So there's two things. There's fund balance, which we have reserves, and then unassigned fund balance, where we say this is the amount of money that's labeled for certain things. There's our cash, which you're looking at the page of the cash. That is what's in those accounts. And most of that is an investment account. Most of our cash is invested. We keep very little. We only keep 1.75 in a cash, actual cash.
Okay, got it. So how do, and not giving any thoughts here, how do you use that money? Do you just draw it out? Is there a penalty to draw it out? Or?
No, there's no penalty.
Okay. All right, thank you. For the water fund revenue and expense overview, so it's a two-part question. The first one, we budgeted to receive about 2.8 million in revenues, and we're 50% to that target. Is that accurate at this point in time of the fiscal year? Or should we be at that target at this point in time?
So the water, hold on, let me find the water.
It is on page 12 of my documents.
9 of yours.
And 9 of yours, yes.
I got both of them on here. I've learned that I have to keep my page numbers and the page numbers. So most of that in the water was capital, which has not happened. There's also in other expenditures, most of that is depreciation, which we don't record until the end of the year. The salaries and benefits, that could be with employees leaving, coming in, and the allocation that was originally budgeted for those employees.
Got you. I'm sorry. I guess my question, I didn't explain it well, because I see what you're saying now. I want to know, what was the actual revenues received for water utility bills by itself versus what we was targeting?
That I would have to get to you, since there's not a large fluctuation, like in the sewer, I believe I separated out because we have the major facility fee that's a large amount. I can get that for you.
If you could, I just want to know like where we are to the target for revenue, because what I'm getting at is, we've been getting some emails about the water increases, rightfully so, and then a lot of feedback from one of our residents regarding the trash can increase. If we are going to get to that target by the end of the fiscal year, is it really necessary to increase the cost of water?
The only concern I would have if we don't increase it, and the increases are minimal. It's a 3% increase
Right.
compared to an 8% last year. We may end up in a situation where then we don't have enough to for capital improvement or the capital upkeep. So because right now the only capital that we're getting from this budget is what's in depreciation. Well, what was purchased years ago is costing a lot more now to replace. So I do have a concern that, and that's part of the study, is the depreciation that we're capturing in these budgets is not appropriate to replacement of those assets.
Okay. Yeah, and I know these questions, they're easy for you to answer. For me, this is my third. I'm still trying to figure out like how this all add up. So I appreciate you explaining it. I think the percent wise is minimum, like when we explain it and you explain it, because this is what you do. I think the concern from residents is, and I know we need to increase it for the depreciation, the cost of services, is the dollar amount on the quarter, where some people are experiencing over $400 a quarter. And obviously we control our water use, but it's a hardship on people who have a fixed income. And I think where Councilman Sampson was going, where I think he was going was, can we get to a point where we know what the rate fees are going to be? I know you said you want to, and they're not fluctuating, but will there ever come a time, and I guess it's kind of hard for water because of inflation and the cost of services, where we might not have to increase fees in a certain point of a fiscal year?
I would be concerned not to do that because our costs are always going to go up every year because of inflation. And then we also have to make sure we have capital. So there's another budget, which is the capital budget that we're now drawing from the savings, our fund balance, which is our savings, to replace or upgrade those capital.
Okay, all right. So it's more than just paying a water bill per se.
Yeah, I would be very concerned if we just said, okay, we're not going to do a fee at all. And then next year we realize that was a big mistake, especially since we have not done a long-term plan, which is something that I've been wanting to do since I came back, because we do not have, we have a very basic one, but we don't have a comprehensive long-term plan. And we shouldn't be making decisions that have a long-term effect if we don't have a plan in place.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. I definitely agree with you. And for the residents, listen to the ones that send those emails. This is a learning process for me, and I think for many of us up here. So bear with us for this budget, and then hopefully, as we go into next year and we have a little bit more understanding how budgets work, we can have those in-depth conversations. The other one is the trash can. I know this is kind of related, but it's, we increase the fees based on the fees that we project. We have to do that based on what the fees are at the landfill, and then also make sure we're being equitable across the resident landscape. You should be paying the same rate if I had one can and somebody got 2 or 3. There is an option for residents to turn in their cans, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
There will be communication once the fee has been approved. There will be communication to all those that we have record of having more than one can.
Okay, thank you. And my last question. So you talk a lot about, well, not a lot about, but you speak about budget amendments and come in at the end of the fiscal year versus when they're done. What is the policy or the thought behind doing it all at once versus coming when the amendment needs to be made?
Well, I would just be coming to you guys more often, and I might say that we made the budget amendment for the IT service for the cybersecurity. Well, maybe we find out we need something else. So now I'm coming back to you again to adjust the budget again for the cybersecurity or
So
IT.
who approves to use money outside of the, is this money already allocated in the budget for it to be an amendment, or is it just change a line item?
No, so for the instance, for the IT, for the cybersecurity, it came to council.
Right.
There was justification that our cybersecurity, we needed the service to be up to par. And council approved that, knowing that there was going to be a budget adjustment.
Okay, I see what you're saying. So we're not just saying, hey, go spend $20,000, you got to come before us anyway, but there's usually a consensus from the council, and then you'll just do the
Correct.
budget amendment later.
Yes.
Okay, that answered my question. Thank
Yes.
you. No other questions. Thank you.
Thank you. And just a point of clarification, just so it crystal clear. Everybody has to have at least one trash can in the town of La Plata. So when they say they're turning in a trash can, those are only the extra ones. I just want to make sure that that's clear, because that is.
Every resident is charged for trash. And if you have an extra can, providing the fees pass, a resident with the extra can will be charged for the extra can, but you can't turn in your can and say that you're you're still going to be charged for the one can.
I just wanted to make sure that's right. Well, thank you very much. Are there any follow-up questions for the actual treasurer report? All right. So moving on, thank you very much.
Can I just ask one thing for council? Because I didn't have a pen writing down your questions, could you please send them to Michelle? Oh, okay, never mind. Thank you.
That brings us to our legislative portion of our agenda. And this is ordinance 25-04, Town of La Plata fiscal year 2026 fee schedule for consideration of adoption. Acting Town Manager Minor.
Madam Mayor, we are looking for consensus to move this forward for adoption.
Looking for a motion, right?
Yeah.
Do you want this paper? Here, I have this. Sorry. Got it. Okay. All right. Sorry.
Point of order, I just have a quick question.
Yes,
I want to make sure, is this the final vote for adoption?
this is, yes.
Yes.
The final,
Thank you.
no worries. All right, now you've got it.
Madam Mayor, ordinance 25-04, Town of La Plata fiscal year 2026 fee schedule. This is the second reading for consideration of adoption. Ordinance concerning Town of La Plata fiscal year 2026 fee schedule for the purpose of adopting the Town of La Plata fiscal year 2026 fee schedule dealing with fees set by the Town of La Plata and all matters generally relating thereto.
Thank you very much. Do I have a motion to accept this ordinance?
Madam Mayor, I make a motion to accept ordinance 25-04, Town of La Plata fiscal year 2026 fee schedule for the purpose of adopting in the fiscal year 2026.
Thank you very much. Do I have a second?
Second.
All right, any discussion?
Yes, Madam.
Yes.
Ms. Minor, this question may be better directed towards Public Works, so I'll ask it and then we can figure out kind of who can answer this. So the first question overall, talking a lot about the trash can issue here with the fee scheduling. I just want to make sure I have it crystal clear, and maybe Ms. Larson actually is the best person now that I say it out loud. We are running with this current plan a 40K deficit, even with the second can, third can payments, the increase of payment to the commercial business to match residential increases. Do I have that correct? Okay. Now, Public Works, with this information, as the subject matter expert, are you comfortable with a fee schedule like this? And what I mean by that is, I think Councilman Sampson was getting to a really interesting point. I think this is going to be an incredibly painful thing for our residents to go through, to ask them to pay. And again, I get it, you know, a lot of money, as Ms. Larson said earlier, I would argue is subjective to one person. Obviously, the fiscal impact is going to be different to another person. But are we comfortable with a plan that still keeps us 40K in the red for this service? And it's going to cause a lot of pain and heartache, in my opinion, to the residents when they see this charge, because no matter how many different ways we put it out there, it's still going to hit residents the first time when they see that bill. I don't think the turn-in is going to be as easy as maybe some of us are saying. So I guess to Public Works, the overall question would be, do you see any risk, any issues with this plan? Do you feel the same way I do or differently, that this may or may not impact the town in a pretty, I would argue, radical way?
Is that directed to?
So to Ms. Minor, and then
Yeah.
if you think it's better to them, yes.
Yeah, well, Mr. Cox, I was going to ask you to come up, and Karina as well. I think you guys have worked on this project for the last couple months, and you've worked all the way through all of this, but I'd like to hear it from both of you.
So
You're
we-
the ones going to be dealing with
Yeah,
the
we've
call.
had several discussions about this and how to approach it. The other thing we wanted to say, there's a lot, and this, I probably should refer to Public Works for this, that there's residents who aren't using our trash cans and they're picking up the trash, and seems to be a lot of that, which is also causing an increased cost to us that's not being passed on to them.
So if you don't mind, I promise you I'm going to ask that right after this, just to keep it up front, right? Because I want to keep it in order to make it organized here. The first question is, if we rolled out this plan, do you think that it will be an easy rollout or a difficult rollout, considering we're still 40K in the red? And then I promise you, I will get into all the extra costs we have with the current status quo. So do you think this will be an easy rollout or a hard rollout for La Plata?
I expect some difficulty just from the pushback of, trying to only pick up what's in the town cans versus everything else.
Yeah,
As
so
far as the finances go, sure, that's not going to be that easy either, but my main concern is the pushback that I will get from only picking up the town designated trash cans.
so you think that part will be even harder than the second can, third can price increase?
I don't know if it'll be harder, but
But there'll be a barrier, right? So like, for example, and we've had folks that were nice enough during last week's discussion admit, hey, sometimes I put it in a different trash can or whatever, and I appreciate the candor from those folks. You are saying that when we stop picking up that trash, They call the truck. In the past, we've gone back to that house, right? We go back to that house. It's not in a La Plata trash can. We're not picking it up is what we're saying moving forward.
That's the idea.
Okay. Now, understood to Ms. Larson, you were getting to this point earlier, and it could be just a rough estimate. What do you think the impact is right now to putting that in the red? So for example, we are essentially providing a free service to folks because if they don't use a Town of La Plata can, one, we talked last week about the dangers to the actual individuals that are lifting up because it's not made for the truck, but two, there's an actual spacing issue here as well, right? Only a certain amount of trash can go into the landfill, et cetera. And if we're picking trash that's outside of that Town of La Plata can, that obviously has an impact. Do you happen to know off the top of your head how many cans we pick up that aren't La Plata cans? I hear us talking about it anecdotally, but do we know the actual impact?
I don't know. I don't have an exact number for you now.
And I don't expect an exact number. Let me maybe rephrase it. When you guys come back after, a hard day's of work or whatever, does anybody ever talk about like, man, I was in, just to name an area, not to say that they do this, I was in Hickory Ridge today and every house has an extra can with, I don't know, grass clippings in it, but we picked them all up. Do you ever get an anecdote or story like that?
Yes, all the time.
Okay. And then roughly, like every time you do a trash pickup, only some of the times you do a trash pickup, what do you think?
I would say it's daily.
Okay. So I want to make sure I get my thoughts out there because again, you guys are the subject matter experts before we move on to a vote that will impact, right, the Town of La Plata here. In your subject matter expert opinion, are you as the Director of Public Works comfortable with this fee schedule? Meaning, it seems like there's going to be an impact to the residents. You understand as the Director of Finance, the town attorney or the town accountant, that this is still going to run a $40K deficit. Is this the best we can do, and are we comfortable with this plan?
I would increase it, but I didn't want to make it unfair where the commercial was paying less than the residential. And I didn't want to increase the commercial to a point that it was unreasonable. But it's either make residents pay for what they use, kind of the water and sewer concept, or make all residents pay an 8% increase no matter how much you use.
So we're running an 80K deficit, right? And this will get it down to at least 40K. Where are we making up that 40K?
Right now, it's coming from fund balance.
Exactly, right?
However, there could be a possibility that there could be savings in other areas that may have been overestimated because we don't know exactly who we're going to hire.
Yes, and this is what we were getting to last week, just for anybody listening for their edification, $2 this week, a lot less than the 12 I spent last week. That is where we may run a risk adverse plan and the actual may come on under, which means that the 40K is a projection, but it's worst case scenario, we could actually end up running a net neutral or even in a black service, correct?
Yes, I would say it's more going to either be neutral.
Okay, so more likely that we end closer to zero, decent chance 40K in the red, somewhere in between is the most likely though, right? Okay. Yeah, again, I guess I'm just, and this may be the private sector in me or whatever, I just think providing a service that runs in the red in the game plan we have here, which is going to cause pain and suffering to the residents, whether we want to admit it or not. I'm very concerned with this fee schedule. There's other areas that we can get into for sure. I mean, water and sewage is a really good example where for whatever reason, folks and they brought this up in several emails and phone calls, they run their sprinkler system, for example, and it still counts against sewer. Like, I guess I'm confused as to, I feel like this fee schedule balances areas that underperform with areas that overperform. And I don't understand why we're not just balancing it by the service itself.
We don't know what you're using water for.
Sure.
We don't know how to calculate it. And with it, you don't want to pay for that water, use other options. There's a lot of options out there. And we should be encouraging more conservatism. I mean, I don't pay for water, but I'm very cautious on water.
Yep.
But to say that, oh, you can spray your lawn and we're going to give you a different rate because it's not necessarily going in sewer, but there could be runoff that goes in stormwater that then gets treated by the sewer. Now you're not paying for it.
Sure. I mean, again, if we understand how these treatments work, we know that that's rarely the case. And let me also challenge back that while, yes, conservatism is obviously incredibly important, everybody should be aware of their water usage. They also have the right, as long as they're following La Plata, code, to use water between the hours that are designated. And other towns and municipalities and states have figured this out. I'm just confused as to, again, Why La Plata just uses the easy fix that causes the, relative pain across the board instead of, to your point, what you're trying to do with the can, which is figure out the individual pricing per person. So I will just conclude with, based off of the testimony from the Director of Public Works here, I am concerned with this fee schedule. I'm not sure, again, that, it accomplishes even the intent that we've kind of talked about here today. And I just want to make sure I got that on the record. So I really appreciate both of you coming up here to answer these questions. I know they're tough. They do impact our residents. To your point, Ms. Larson, I know this is probably an unpopular thing, but I would be inclined to just do the 8% increase across the board and then ensure that we figure out what to do on the back end when it comes to a second and third can than doing what I think is a half-baked plan.
All right, any other discussion?
Yes, Madam Mayor.
Yeah.
All right, sorry.
Go ahead.
Two questions. So, Councilman McCormick brought up a good point. This increase is still going to run a deficit. Two questions. If we adopt this fee schedule tonight, are we able to, as a council, or has it been practiced to suspend the fee cost in certain areas until we figure out more of the four-baked plan for our understanding?
We've never suspended a fee as long as I've been here.
Okay.
I think they'd be running a risk that we're now putting out the cost and not recouping revenue to support that cost.
We have adjusted a fee throughout the year. We've never suspended one.
Okay.
But that was due to I know Plan Check increased their fees and didn't inform us a few years ago.
Yeah.
So that was something that was unplanned.
I'm just getting that if it's running the deficit. I mean, Councilman McCormick made a good point. The second question would be, if this don't go forward, what do the town operate on? The 2024 or the fiscal 2025 fee schedule, or how does that work, Ms. Minor or Ms. Larson? Has it not been practiced before?
That has never happened before. So I'm not sure how we would approach that.
Yeah, I understand where you're coming from with how we got this fee schedule, how we want to be equitable, how the cost of service increase, and why we want residents to be engaged and pay attention and do their due diligence. The reality of it is not many of us do. So, okay. The two theories that I asked have not been practiced. So thank you.
We've put ourselves in this position because we are a service-oriented organization, and our past community studies have proven that our trash pickup is in the 90th percentile. And as our director said, somebody calls, we go back and pick it up.
Right.
We're not following our best practices. We're trying to keep the citizens
Happy.
happy.
Yeah, I understand. It's a double-edged sword
Yep.
for everyone. So appreciate it. Thank you.
I can be very quick, I promise.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think it's important because we've kind of cracked open this issue and we're about to vote on it. So I want to just, I also bring a private sector view of service, fee-based services. So I think we're looking at a 79K deficit, right, from our discussion last week. I think the second can policy cuts that in half. I think I'd like to also acknowledge that we have pretty conservative budgeting practices here. And it is very likely that we will find inside of this existing service, 40K of additional funding without doing anything other than having the public service crews operate as they do. The other thing I'd like to point out is when we're looking at a 3% service fee to residents versus an 8% fee, I think it should be remembered too that last week we discussed about 250 people-ish is what we think the relative number of two-can households are. When I compare that to the total number of houses in the town, we are affecting a lot more people if we go to an 8% fee versus a 3% fee. And with the amount of cash balances that we talked about that this town has on hand that we don't have good policies on how much those need to be, I think that we can very safely make the decision to not do an 8% fee on trash increase and just do a 3% fee and manage our way through this. And hopefully through learning with this, we can do this at a more complicated scale on the rest of the fees, because that's what the residents are really wanting for us. So I hope that, as a council, we can vote for this fee schedule as it is and work together to adapt the service delivery on this and deal with ironing out some of the wrinkles that we know some residents are going to have, right? And I think through communication, we can probably smooth that out. And that's all I'll say. Thank you.
All right, so we have a motion and we have had it properly seconded and lots of discussion. Mr. Town Clerk, would you please take a roll call? If you are in favor of adopting this ordinance 25-04, please say aye. If not, say nay.
Okay. Councilman Gutenberg,
Aye.
Councilman McCormick,
Nay.
Councilman Sampson,
Nay.
Councilman Johnson,
That was an aye.
Yeah, my mic was red. I apologize. Aye.
it's cool. Mayor James.
Aye.
All right, Madam Mayor, the motion passes.
All right, next piece of legislation is ordinance 25-05, the Town of La Plata fiscal year 26 financial plan.
Madam Mayor, second reading for consideration of adoption and ordinance concerning Town of La Plata fiscal year 2026 financial plan budget for the purpose of adopting the Town of La Plata fiscal year 2026 financial plan budget and all matters generally relating thereto.
All right, do I have a motion to adopt ordinance 25-05?
Just a quick point of inquiry, Madam Mayor.
Go ahead, Councilman Foreman.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So if we motion this second, move to discussion, let's say, I'm not saying anybody, but let's say we wanted to change something to the actual budget itself. When is it appropriate to make that motion? Because obviously there would be a motion open during the discussion. I just want to make sure we're following the procedure correctly.
If there is a motion to amend the budget, it would be made first.
Okay, so a motion to amend would be made first, and then if
If there's a
The will of the
second,
council,
then it
got
will
it.
be discussed. If not, then we go to a motion to accept and to adopt as presented.
Okay, so I will make a motion to amend the fiscal year 26 budget. I would like to add whatever the cost is, and I leave it to the finance director and director of HR to figure out to discuss LEOPS and its adoption and at least the discussion of the implementation. I think it's 7.3K in the FY 26 budget.
Okay, do I have a second?
Madam Mayor, I'd like to make an amendment to Councilman's
You
McCormick.
have to,
So second first and then come back, or?
if you're accepting his amendment as its entirety, then you second that. If not, then you do not.
Okay.
And then the motion would fail if there is not a second and a vote.
Second for discussion. Second.
So you're adopting this one. That means no other changes if it goes through.
Well,
So
how do I offer amendment to his amendment?
Then you don't accept, then you don't vote on
Okay.
this amendment and you can add
Do
it
another one.
to this amendment would fail.
Understood.
Would fail.
Thank you.
and
So
then
right
this one
now,
was seconded, right?
are you seconding?
I'm gonna withdraw because I'll make another amendment.
I'll second.
So you are gonna second?
Yes, I will second.
Okay, any discussion?
So I just have a quick question during the discussion, Madam Mayor, if you
Okay.
don't mind. So Councilman Johnson, I'm assuming you have something you want to add or amend or discuss. Do you mind if I ask, like, what is that, just so we're better educated here?
Yeah, it is to adopt ordinance 25-05 with the addition of adding a 1.5% bonus for employees to be distributed by the town manager upon his arrival, having him determine the best method of distributing those funds with department heads.
Would it make sense from a procedural standpoint to vote on this and then amend again to do that? Or do we have to put both together, Madam Mayor?
It would be easier and cleaner to put them both together.
Okay, so with that, I'm okay with discussion to vote against my own motion for LEOPS with the assumption that we're going to do another motion with LEOPS and a discussion on the merit raise that you're bringing up. Do I have that correct?
No, the proper one would be that you withdraw your.
Oh, so I can just withdraw it.
You can
Correct.
withdraw your.
And then Councilman Johnson, I'm assuming you would make a motion, LEOPS and the merit
we
raise.
Have a second here, so he's withdrawing his motion.
Well, I haven't said that yet, Madam Mayor. I'm asking a question to Councilman Johnson to make sure I have the procedure correct. So I'm gonna, if I withdraw this, you would then make a motion, LEOPS and a merit raise.
Correct, yes.
Okay.
Oh, bonus, not a merit increase.
Sure, and I apologize for that. Okay, I will withdraw my motion under the contingent that Councilman Johnson makes that motion.
You can't do a contingency.
So I
It's either
withdraw my motion, Madam Mayor.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So motion is withdrawn.
A lot of pressure. All right, Madam Mayor, I make a motion. Thank you. I make a motion to adopt ordinance 25-05 with the addition of adding a 1.5% bonus for employees to be distributed by the town manager, with him determining the best method of distributing the funds to employees in collaboration with department heads, and adding the cost to initiate an evaluation for LEOPS in fiscal year 2026, which is approximately $7.3 to $7.5 thousand.
All right, I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion?
Yes, Madam Mayor, if that's okay. So Ms. Minor, I know that you asked Ms. Larson earlier, like, what is the cost to the bonus? I think Councilman Johnson, you just said 1.5%, just for the edification of the town. I know you answered us privately. What would roughly that cost be? And then again, I know we talked about it last week. When was the last time a merit raise or a bonus or anything like that was paid out to our town employees?
Your first question at the 1.5% will be $110,795.
Okay, 110,795.
95.
Thank you. Okay. Okay. And then the second question, last time there was a merit raise bonus, anything like that for our town employees?
23. FY 23.
That is 2 years ago or 3 years ago? Got it. So 2 years ago from today, 3 years ago from a month from now, right?
Right.
Okay, excellent. Second question, Councilman Johnson just made a motion for LEOPS to be included as well. What is the cost to do the evaluation? I know we've talked about it for the last 2 weeks, but for the edification of town, anybody that's maybe here for the first time, what's that rough cost?
Director Kennedy at 7,000.
Okay.
305.
And that's what we're going forward with here with this motion. So that means that Director, who would be the lead there, Ms. Minor, for our negotiation for LEOPS for the town?
That'd be Director Kennedy with
Okay.
Human Resources.
Okay, so Director Kennedy will now be our lead, right, to figure out the cost to LEOPS. That's what we're asking for here. Just to quell any concerns out there for folks that maybe aren't in favor of LEOPS. One, we don't even know what the cost is to the town, so let's find out, which is what this does. But two, this is not passage of LEOPS. This is the first step in figuring out if LEOPS is amendable to our town, correct?
Exactly.
Okay.
Director Kennedy, is that a correct assumption?
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much.
So I have a motion. It's been properly seconded. If you are in favor, please say aye. If you are not, please say nay. Mr. Town Clerk, could you please do a roll call?
Councilman Gutenberg,
Aye.
Councilman McCormick,
Aye.
Councilman Sampson,
Aye.
Councilman Johnson,
Aye.
Mayor James.
Aye.
All right, Madam Mayor, the motion passes.
And this brings us to ordinance 25-06, which is the fiscal year tax rate.
Madam Mayor, Town Council, for the second reading and consideration of adoption, an ordinance concerning Town of La Plata fiscal year 2026 tax rate. For the purpose of adopting the Town of La Plata fiscal year 2026 tax rate and all matters generally relating thereto.
Thank you very much. Do I have a motion to accept ordinance 25-06 as presented?
Madam Mayor, I make a motion to adopt ordinance 25-06 fiscal year tax rate for 2026 as presented.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
Just a quick question, Madam Mayor.
Go ahead, Councilman McCormick.
Thank you. Ms. Minor or Ms. Larson, I don't know who it's better directed to. Just to make sure I'm reading this clearly, the effective tax rate is 35 cents per $100. That is no change from last year's tax rate.
Yes, sir, exactly.
Okay. So again, nice and loud into the mic if you don't mind. For the townsfolk, no change to the tax rate.
No
correct?
change to the tax rate from last year, 0.35 cents for every $100 assessed value.
Thank you very much. And that includes no change to the tax rate, figuring out the LEOPS cost and a new 1.5% bonus.
Yes.
Beautiful. Yes, yeah, they
Yeah.
go under different budgets, but
Okay.
yes. Thank you.
We're on this ordinance. We have a motion that has been seconded. And it is 35 cents to 100. Disregard the other two things because they don't apply. If you are in favor, please indicate by saying aye. If not, please say no. Mr. Town Clerk?
Councilman Gutenberg,
Aye.
Councilman McCormick,
Aye.
Councilman Sampson,
Aye.
Councilman Johnson,
Aye.
Mayor James.
Aye.
Madam Mayor, the motion passes.
Thank you very much. That brings us to new business. We will get reports from mayor and town council. Councilman Gutenberg, do you have a report for us today?
Not really. I'll just note that next week I start my first meeting with the planning commission. So I have a lot of homework to do there and I'm looking forward to getting started with them on June 2nd, I believe it is.
Wonderful. Councilman McCormick.
Yes, Madam Mayor, three things for new business. So first, the La Plata Police Department had their awards banquet this Thursday. Thank you very much for inviting us. My father was a police officer. It brought me right back to my childhood, being in that room and seeing all of you celebrated for the hard work and dedication you bring to town. So thank you very much for that. Secondly, the Friday concert series kicked off. We did have a service beforehand with, again, the La Plata Police Department over at our Veterans Memorial stand over there. So thank you for that. And then third, there were a couple of emails and questions and phone calls on Memorial Day itself. Ms. Minor and I did speak. The town did miss putting out the Memorial Day flags. That will not happen moving forward. We have the 4 days that we know we have to put them out, and that will not be a miss moving forward there. So again, thank you very much for that quick communication, Ms. Minor. I do appreciate it.
You're welcome.
All right, Councilman Sampson.
Yes, I just have a note. I'd like to thank the La Plata Police Department. There was a persistent noise disturbance taking place over in Ward 3. And after the chief became aware, that was taken care of. And I received a positive comment from the resident. And that resident, Ms. Simpson, wanted me to thank you all. And I just need to know, town manager Meyer, should I send that thank you to you to send to them, or do I send it directly to the chief?
You can send it to me and then we can make sure it gets in the employee file and I'll forward it on to the chief.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilman Johnson.
Yes, Madam Mayor, thank you. We have an opening on the Parks and Recreation Commission. We have 2 interviews tentatively scheduled for next week. Our conversations with those 2 applicants. And if this is not appropriate, let me know. I just want to address, I voted yes for the fee schedule under the assumption that our town staff did their due diligence, and that if we don't do it this year, we'll be back next year asking for more, although we do know it is a deficit for what has been asked. So it's kind of like a double-edged sword, but that's where I am.
All right, thank you. And for me, so Friday night, we did kick off our summer series and it was beautiful, a little chilly. Beautiful weather though, and Girl Crush really did a good job. This Friday, we are having the Steve Potter Band that will be here. And we're in graduation season too. So we have started, tomorrow we will congratulate all of those that are graduating from La Plata High School. I will be there to cheer them on and their families. Today, St. Charles High School and Lackey graduated. And in addition to La Plata High School, McDonough and North Point are graduating tomorrow. And on Thursday, Westlake and Thomas Stone will be graduating. So please, congratulate those that are graduating. And I do want to add one clarifying statement for the record. Well, Councilman McCormick stated that he requested the town attorney to attend this meeting. It is very important to clarify that such a request exceeds the authority of a single council member. In accordance with the Town of La Plata rules and procedures, and the charter and the rules and procedures, it's resolution 25-07, which was passed by the council on May 13th, 2025. Only the town council as a collective body or the town manager individually has the authority to request the attendance of the town attorney at a council meeting. Therefore, your unilateral request, Councilman McCormick, was out of line in establishment with the governance procedures. But I just wanted to make sure that that was on the record. And with that, I thank you for coming and meeting adjourned.